Rick called me dead weight while sipping a $7 protein shake and adjusting his cufflinks like he'd just cured cancer instead of misquoting our quarterly burn rate. You're not scaling with the company, Lena, he said, eyes skimming the PowerPoint I built. We need velocity. Agility. You've plateaued. Plateaued? I'd onboarded 3 entire divisions, negotiated 2 vendor crises, and saved the company's ass when our shipment pipeline got cyberjacked by Estonian teens. But sure, Rick, tell the room I'm a rock in the river of innovation. The CFO blinked like he'd been slapped. The new hires, their eyes dropped to their complimentary notebooks. HR, already dialing their phones under the table like they'd rehearsed this. By the time Rick clicked to the next slide, Next Gen Staffing Solutions, Susan from HR was sliding a manila folder across the table. Let's schedule a quick checkout, Lena. Quick? I hadn't even finished my goddamn iced coffee. They didn't even let me go back to my desk. I was escorted out by a girl in kitten heels who smelled like vanilla vape juice and apologized with her eyes. I nodded, didn't say a word, just kept my face flat like drywall while my gut twisted like a snapped belt. I sat in the parking lot, keys in my lap, watching them wheel in my replacement. Some MBA grad with Bluetooth earbuds still blinking like he was charging more than his phone. He high-fived Rick at the door. Not kidding, high-fived. I wondered if his handshake came with stock options or just a mutual loathing of anyone over 40. And yeah, if you're hearing this and you've ever been blindsided like that, cut off mid-career like a tumor HR found on a spreadsheet. You already know what came next. The disbelief, the white noise, that weird feeling like your soul's watching from the back seat while your body just keeps breathing. And hey, real quick before we dive headfirst into the mess, 97% of folks listening right now aren't subscribed. I know, who wants another button to press. But it really helps the team that digs this story out from the rubble and polishes it with Marlboro ashes and revenge. If you're into workplace backstabs, karmic whiplash, or watching Rick types eat crow smash that sub, it keeps the lights on. Literally, we work out of a garage, back to the scene. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't throw my badge at the receptionist and demand justice. I sat, engine off, phone buzzing with Slack pings that didn't know I'd been vaporized. And beneath the numbness, something colder began to settle. Not grief, not even rage, strategy. Rick wanted me out, fast, too fast. HR didn't blink, which meant this wasn't spontaneous, it was an op, a removal. What did I know that made me dangerous? I looked down at the folder in my lap. Generic, no cause stated. Just a line about departmental realignment and a signature Rick scribbled like a man who signs pink slips between rounds of golf. I reached into my glove box, pulled out a decades-old Christmas card, faded gold foil. Scrawl to the one who saved our quarter, Harold and Mags Pierce. Harold, the old man with the gravel voice and handshake like a vice, ran the materials supplier Rick's entire company sucked from like a sippy cup. And suddenly, I knew exactly where to start. The first time I met Harold Pierce, he called my handshake limp as a boiled noodle and handed me a mug that smelled like diesel fuel pretending to be coffee. He ran Pierce Materials like a rusted battleship. Tight crew, tighter margins, no patience for bullshit. I was 29, in kitten heels and a polyester blazer, trying to explain why his resin shipments needed to be repackaged for traceability compliance. He chewed on a toothpick and told me I sounded like a pamphlet. Then he asked if I'd ever fixed a conveyor belt in heels. I told him I'd rebuilt an ERP system during a thunderstorm on a dial-up VPN. He grunted. Close enough. That man didn't email, he faxed. Still used a ledger with grease stains on the corners. But when our storage facility caught fire in 2017, and we had 48 hours to rebuild our component pipeline or kiss Q4 goodbye, Harold rerouted 2 months' worth of inventory from his Illinois branch on his word alone. Not a contract, just a call. We made the quarter. Barely. And I sent him a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue and a thank you card. In return, a week later, I got one of his. To the one who saved our quarter, Harold and Mags. I kept it in my glove box next to expired mints and a Swiss Army knife with my name engraved by an ex I don't talk about anymore. Now I held that card like it was a compass. I remembered his daughter too, Ellie, sweet kid. Graduated summa come something from OSU, but couldn't land a real internship because every HR office wanted 3 years of experience and fluency in Mandarin. I bent a rule or 3 and got her a spot in logistics. She busted her ass and I made sure she got credit for it. She'd emailed me last year, Dad's thinking of retiring. No clue what happens to the company if he does. I'm not cut out for the steel boots and 3 a.m. freight runs. At the time, I'd replied with something canned. He'll know what's best. Now I opened that email again, read it twice, then 3 times. I didn't need revenge, I needed leverage. I drove home, sat in my kitchen with a microwave burrito sweating on a paper towel, and opened my old personal laptop, the one with the cracked hinge and a VPN that still worked like a charm. I typed Ohio LLC formation process into the search bar and felt something click in my chest. Not vengeance, calculation. I pulled up Pierce Materials on the state business registry. Single owner, privately held, estimated annual gross, just shy of what I'd call vulnerable. Ellie didn't want the business. Harold was pushing 80. Their top account, us, Correction them and them? Just tossed their operations anchor out the back of the boat to make room for a puppy-faced yes-man who probably still needed Google Maps to find the warehouse. All I had to do was build a boat before they realized they were sinking. By midnight, I had bookmarked 6 legal firms, opened a spreadsheet labeled Holdings Model, and cracked open my emergency scotch, gifted by the CFO 2 Christmases ago, ironically, for keeping Rick from running the company off a cliff. The more I typed, the quieter the house became. No TV, no texts, no distractions. Just me, the whir of the fridge, and the sound of a woman being reborn in Excel. Let them think I was out of the game. I wasn't done, just changing boards. I went dark like a power outage in a cheap motel, sudden, complete, and inconvenient for anyone trying to find me. No goodbye posts, no moving on to new adventures LinkedIn fluff. I didn't RSVP to Jill from Accounts retirement lunch, didn't respond to Darren's half-hard you good text. Let the rumor mill churn. I was a ghost now, and ghosts don't do industry mixers. First step, lawyer. Not the khaki-soled corporate kind who plays golf with Rick and double bills your corpse. I found a guy named Pete who operated out of a strip mall between a vape shop and a cat-themed thrift store. His website was HTML circa 2004, but his reviews were a graveyard of phrases like ironclad, discreet, and crushed my ex. Perfect. Single member LLC, I said as he slid me a mug with a cartoon skeleton saying "see you later." He grunted. You planning to be visible or invisible? Invisible, I replied. I want my name nowhere near the waterline. By the end of the week, LMM Holdings, LLC existed on paper, registered to a P.O. box in Chillicothe. No traceable connection to me outside Pete's firewall of paperwork. I wired the startup capital from a money market account I hadn't touched since my dad died. He always said, don't use this unless someone puts a knife in your back or a baby in your belly. Rick had provided the knife. The belly was blissfully empty. Then came the real game. I didn't go to Harold. I went to Ellie. I knew what Pierce Materials was worth on paper and off. I'd seen their receivables. I was one of their receivables. I knew their overhead didn't include a future plan. Harold was proud, but pride doesn't extend your knees or slow down the rot in the loading dock ceiling. Ellie, though, she saw the writing on the wall. She just didn't have the chalk to redraw it. We met at a diner off Route 30, the kind with pie that's been under the same sneeze guard since the Bush administration. She wore a puffer jacket and no makeup. Looked like she hadn't slept since Halloween. I don't want to disrespect my dad, she started, stirring her coffee with the slow dread of someone about to betray blood. You're not, I said. You're saving what he built, and you're giving him a way out with dignity. That was my angle, not takeover salvation. The old man gets a golden parachute. Ellie gets to breathe. I get 51% voting control and a foot on the neck of the company that thought firing me was just a line item in Q1 expenses. The offer was modest but strategic. I didn't need the whole thing, just enough to steer the ship. Pete handled the papers. Ellie signed. Harold didn't even protest. Long as you keep the floor guys employed, he said, and don't turn the place into some tech startup daycare. Cross my heart, I told him. We shook on it. His grip wasn't as strong as it used to be. Mine was stronger than ever. By Friday, the paperwork was notarized, the bank account linked. LMM Holdings owned 51% of Pierce Materials. No press releases, no handshakes, no photo ops with tiny scissors and oversized ribbons, just a single ledger entry in a file no one thought to check. I didn't smile, didn't toast, didn't even update my resume, because this wasn't the win. This was just loading the chamber. Rick always had the subtlety of a sledgehammer dipped in cologne. Word around the vendor chain was he was cleaning house. Cost-cutting blitz aimed squarely at anyone who'd ever dared to handshake instead of hyperlink. He strutted through purchasing like a man who'd just discovered spreadsheets and thought they were holy scripture. Too many cozy deals, he barked in one all-hands call, probably while microwaving salmon in the break room again. Start fresh. Negotiate hard. No more legacy deadweight. Everyone's replaceable. I bet he thought he was being revolutionary, bold, efficient. But in truth, he was a toddler with a chainsaw, slicing through roots he didn't even know were keeping the tree upright. First to go was Deb, poor Deb, 32 years with Pierce Materials. Ran the vendor interface like a back alley bookie, tight, quiet, and always on time. Rick called her an unnecessary middle layer, said her emotional loyalty made her a soft negotiator. So he had one of his shiny new junior buyers, some LinkedIn larva named Troy, email her a termination notice at 4:57 p.m. on a Friday. Deb didn't respond, she didn't have to. Her access badge had already been revoked by the time she got the message. I watched it happen from my new office, a converted storage room above the Pierce main warehouse, where the Wi-Fi was spotty but the view of karma was crystal clear. Deb forwarded me the email. I read it twice. No severance, no thanks. Just we've decided to explore other supplier options. Effective immediately. Troy even spelled effective wrong. Thing is, Rick assumed Pierce would crawl back. He thought dependency made us desperate. What he didn't realize was that Deb had built those vendor bridges not just with contracts but favors, flexibilities, late-night freight swaps, rush orders shipped before the ink even dried, all undocumented, all based on mutual respect. Without Deb, there was no one left who knew how to call in those debts. By Tuesday, their main shipment of polyresin tubing was 2 days late. By Wednesday, the calibration adhesive didn't arrive at all. One of the newer engineers filed a ticket titled where the FK is the Q3 batch into the shared queue, and the timestamp said 2:14 a.m. Cracks began to show. Procurement thought it was a logistics glitch. Ops blamed QA. Someone even floated Russian hackers during a Slack thread that got mysteriously deleted. I didn't lift a finger. See, we hadn't breached any contracts. Not on paper. But all the soft terms, those unspoken handshakes and verbal assurances, those got flushed the second Deb was canned. And since no one at Rick's company had bothered to reread our updated T and C to Kess, they didn't realize that late shipments were no longer penalized on our end. We'd updated that clause a month ago. Quietly, legally, retroactively. I told the warehouse guys not to stress. Fulfill as capacity allows, I said. We have other clients now. We didn't, not yet, but we would. And in the meantime, Rick's floor was running dry, his people scrambling to reorder. His junior buyers cold calling backups who didn't have the inventory or the patience to play discount roulette. I kept my silence. Didn't send a message, didn't leak a quote. Let Rick think it was a fluke. Let Troy draft panic emails that started with per my last request and ended with PLS advise. Let them sweat, because this wasn't the checkmate. It was just the queen shifting position. The walls didn't cave in all at once. They splintered. Hairline fractures in the drywall of Rick's kingdom, silent, spreading, and ignored until the ceiling starts dripping brown water onto your quarterly forecast. It started with a 7:42 a.m. email from engineering. Shipment 991B arrived incomplete. Missing certifications on adhesive batch. ISO tag wasn't sealed. 2 hours later, plastic tubes from Pierce are warping under heat test. Different supplier? Rick replied like he always did, short, smug, dismissive. Use stock reserves, rotate inventory. Find root cause, we have options. Except they didn't. Their reserves were tapped. Their inventory manager had been fired during last quarter's streamlining initiative. And the root cause? Well, she was drinking iced tea with Harold Pierce's granddaughter while reading every escalation as it hit her inbox, forwarded by Deb, who was now on retainer under LMM Holdings' new client continuity team. Then came the kicker. Someone in finance, bless their overworked soul, was running invoice reconciliations and paused long enough to read the new header. Didn't say Pierce Materials, LLC anymore. It said LMM Holdings, LLC, clean font, new IN, same payment terms on paper. But something about it itched. They emailed procurement. Procurement forwarded to legal. Legal, predictably, was 3 days behind and still chewing on NDA paperwork from a failed AI contractor Rick had tried to court via golf and vague buzzwords. Meanwhile, upstairs in the break room, the new hires were whispering over stale muffins. Did you hear Lena was at the McAllister dinner? No way, with who? VP of Client Dev at Jasper Co. Swear to God, Greg from sales saw her. Said she looked different. What kind of different? Like she owned the damn table. She did, actually. It was a round table vendor forum, Jasper Co.'s way of sniffing out stable partners for a multimillion-dollar expansion. I didn't speak much, just sat beside their VP while she ranted about weak supply chains and old boy networks. When she paused, I slid her a card. Just the logo, LMM Holdings. She raised an eyebrow. You're with them now? I smiled. I am them? She grinned. Let's talk. I didn't gloat. I didn't announce. I let silence do the talking. It was louder than anything I could say. Back at my old company, the panic spread like mold under carpet. Buyers weren't getting callbacks. Logistics couldn't get delivery estimates. QA kept flagging material inconsistencies. And every time someone tried to raise the alarm, Rick would say the same thing, we have alternatives. Except he didn't. Because I'd quietly inked exclusivity clauses with 2 of Pierce's secondary vendors, nothing overt, just small penalties for dual supply, enough to make Rick's calls bounce into voicemail purgatory. Still, I waited. I wanted the pressure to build, not boil. One more clause, one more delay, one more moment of uncertainty where someone glances at the org chart and realizes she's not gone. The fear in their voices hadn't turned to respect yet, but it was getting there, and I could taste it. The call came in at 3:12 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of time procurement thinks is late enough to sneak something past legal, early enough to dodge end-of-day accountability. His name was Barry, mid-level, wore ill-fitting suits and thought charm was just smiling while undercutting someone's margins. Hi there, calling from Consolidated Ops, he started, too chipper, too fake. We're doing a refresh on some of our partner terms and noticed the invoice turnarounds changed. Wanted to chat through options, maybe get back to the old net 60? I waited a beat. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Hi Barry, I said evenly. This is Lena Matthews. Silence, then a cough. Then, oh wow, I didn't realize you'd taken over the supplier you just tried to undercut. Yes, it's been an eventful quarter, he scrambled. Listen, we've had a lot of movement internally. Some miscommunications, nothing major. I think we can find a middle ground if we no longer offer net 60, I said. Your company was notified last week. Deadline to sign was Tuesday. No signature received. Well, maybe we could make a temporary exception? Barry, I said, and my voice sharpened like a nail file on glass. You missed the window. You're on prepay terms now. Wire transfer before shipment. No credit, no float, no favors, he stammered. I hung up. That was the first time I let it hit me. The shift. The moment when the power didn't just return, it settled. Not like adrenaline, like gravity. Heavier, permanent. Barry called Rick. Of course he did. Rick, who still thought he was the goddamn sheriff in town. And Rick, poor Rick, was in Miami for a leadership retreat that was really just 3 days of shouting over club music with his frat-aged consultant buddies, while pretending to bond over disruption and $24 mojitos. He didn't even see it coming. At 11:43 p.m. that night, while I was brushing my teeth and watching reruns of forensic files, the consolidated factory floor went dark. Shipment hash 848 never arrived. Backup supplies were locked in quarantine because the material certification, intentionally delayed, had expired mid-transit. I didn't cause the shutdown. I just stopped preventing it. Rick was summoned back to his suite like a drunk lifeguard to a drowning pool. His voice, according to someone in ops, was 3 octaves higher than usual during the emergency call with logistics. The message was clear: get Pierce Materials to move. Now. Except it wasn't Pierce Materials anymore. It was me, and I wasn't moving for anyone. I slept fine that night. No dreams, no doubts, just the soft hum of the fridge and the subtle, addicting thrum of control finding its way back into my bloodstream. But I wasn't done. Monday was coming, and Monday, that was my day. It hit the inboxes like a thunderclap through a broken intercom. Industry Weekly Brief, hash 172, buried between a soy-based epoxy acquisition in Illinois and a manufacturing CEO's DUI charge. There it was. Pierce Materials quietly acquired by LMM Holdings, LLC, terms undisclosed. New operating partner listed, Lena Matthews. The text was small, but the impact seismic. By 9:13 a.m. Saturday morning, the company's Slack was a digital panic room. Screenshots, speculation, emojis pinging like gunfire. No one said it out loud, but the undercurrent was immediate and feral. We FK'd up. Rick, who just posted a selfie on a yacht with a caption about vision casting, went full ghost. No likes, no replies. By noon, he'd landed back in Ohio and was blowing up Harold Pierce's landline, which, bless him, still had one of those corded phones with the big red hold button. Harold answered on the third ring. I know this because I was sitting beside him, sipping lemon water and watching reruns of Bonanza in his living room. The phone was so old it clicked like a revolver when picked up. Rick Delano here, Rick barked, voice slick with urgency. We need to talk. I saw the brief. We can work through this. I know Lena's involved, but if we can just circle back to terms, Harold grunted, handed me the phone like it was a bag of trash, and muttered, you'll want to speak to Miss Matthews. I took the receiver. Rick, I said, dead silence. Then, you're really behind this, I am this. You went behind my back. You threw me under a bus, I replied calmly. I simply bought the road it drives on. He started blustering, contracts, partnerships, ethics. I hung up before he hit the word collaborative. 2 hours later, someone in procurement must have hit the panic button. An email went out to Deb's old line, now routed directly to my transition team. Subject line, termination of account manager services body. Due to ongoing inflexibility and performance concerns, we are formally ending our working relationship with your current rep. We expect a transition plan by EOD Monday. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. They just fired the representative of their own supplier's owner, with zero idea who they were talking to. I let it sit in the inbox like a landmine. Didn't reply. Didn't need to. It lit the fuse themselves. Sunday, I took the day off. First one in months. Drove to a state park. Watched geese scream at the wind. Ate a sandwich I didn't make myself. Turned my phone to silent and left it that way. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Control, not safety, not peace, control. Like I was no longer reacting to the world, but shaping it. Slowly, quietly, permanently, Monday morning was coming. They had no idea what was waiting in the lobby. At exactly 9 a.m., Michelle from procurement, newish, eager, barely survived Rick's last culture realignment, opened her Outlook, squinted at the weekend threads, and finally did the math. She didn't scream, she just whispered it, barely audible. But in a department run on passive panic and cold brew, it was enough to set off a chain reaction. Oh my God, she said. We fired the supplier rep. Keith from contracts looked up from his yogurt. Okay, so, she is the supplier. What? She owns them. Lena Matthews is LMM Holdings. It's in the brief. We fired our owner. A buyer 2 cubicles over dropped his banana and stood up, voice rising like a siren. You fired our owner? The floor detonated, phones ringing. Slack messages firing off like Morse code. Someone sprinted down the hall to legal. Someone else started crying. It was beautiful. Pure chaos. Blooming like mold under LED lights. Rick got the call mid-stride on his way in, Bluetooth jammed in his ear, still reeking of overpriced hair product and panic sweat. Get everyone into conference room B. Now, he thought he was going to fix it. Thought he'd walk in, charm his way through another misfire with that same plastic grin and MBA jargon salad. Instead, he turned the corner and saw me. Sitting in the lobby, crossed legs, folder in my lap. Plain black cover, silver embossed, intent to audit. Receptionist glanced up. She's been here since 8:45, asked for nothing, just said you'd know. Rick froze, paled, then tried to smile. Lena, I was just going to. I stood, smooth, measured. You'll want to review page 3. It's the clause you forgot to update when you scrubbed our contract in Q2. Turns out, price escalation triggers when a key stakeholder is terminated without cause. His face twitched. It didn't terminate, we reassigned. You filed a termination notice, I said, handing him a printed copy of his own email. To my employee, the one you never realized was speaking on my behalf. Conference room B was full by the time we entered. Procurement, legal, ops, even Janine from finance, who looked like she hadn't slept in 4 days. Rick tried to set the tone. Let's all take a deep breath. I've already sent the audit trigger to your system's compliance officer, I said. You'll see the updated supply terms include a 22% price correction and quarterly oversight. Someone coughed. Someone else started praying. Rick laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. You think you can just walk in here and rewrite the rules? I didn't answer. Because that's when the CFO spoke. Wait, can someone explain how she's even involved? I thought she was terminated. I slid a copy of the acquisition agreement across the table. The date bolded at the top, 3 days after my firing. His hands trembled as he flipped the pages. She's not involved, said Janine from finance. Her voice was quiet but final. She's the majority stakeholder. Rick stood. This is insane. And that's when the board liaison walked in. A calm man in a slate suit who only showed up when lawsuits were in orbit. He looked at me, then at Rick. You mean Miss Matthews, the supplier's majority owner? Silence. I leaned back in my chair, smoothed my blouse, and said the words I'd rehearsed once in the mirror, just to get the cadence right. Dead weight? No, just patient. The boardroom was a mausoleum of bad decisions and cheap coffee. Rick stood at the head of the table, still pretending the blood wasn't already pooling under his feet. His tie was off-center. His hair, usually crisp and weaponized, collapsed into something that looked like a defeated raccoon. I didn't sit this time. I stood, folder in hand, calm, poised, wearing the same black blazer they said wasn't leadership material during my last performance review. Let's begin, I said. Your company has breached multiple soft obligations tied to long-standing vendor trust terms. These aren't in your ERP, they're not in Jira, and they sure as hell aren't in your KPI dashboards. But they're real, and they held your operations together like duct tape on a cheap muffler. No one interrupted. Rick tried once, opened his mouth like he was going to circle back, but I raised a hand and steamrolled right through. Going forward, LMM Holdings will resume shipments under a revised pricing model. Effective immediately, materials will be delivered under 50% deposit terms, with remaining payment due upon delivery. 22% markup reflects legacy service loss, transition costs, and, let's call it severance. I turned toward the CFO. He looked like someone had replaced his coffee with battery acid. Who approved this? He croaked. I slid the folder across the polished table. Leather-bound, thick with weight, purchase agreement, I said, executed the week after I was fired. Ownership share, 51%. Effective control, mine. Rick exploded. This is insane. She doesn't have authority here. She was terminated. She ran spreadsheets and booked vendor dinners. She wasn't even on the senior team. Funny, I said, eyes never leaving his. I recall running point when your procurement system almost tanked because you outsourced onboarding to interns. He sneered. You're just a glorified admin. You took advantage of an old man and bought your way into a seat you didn't earn. A sharp inhale cut the air. The board chair. An older woman with decades of corporate poker face carved into her bones leaned forward. You mean Miss Matthews, she said, tone cool as glacial melt, the supplier's majority owner? Rick froze. His mouth opened then closed, like a fish trying to argue with a hook. Sit down, she added, and he did. I didn't gloat, I didn't smirk. I just placed one final paper on the table, a prepared quarterly audit schedule with my signature at the bottom. Clean, final. And I turned to the board, voice steady. This company underestimated the invisible labor that kept its gears greased. They replaced it with noise and speed. Now you're paying for silence and friction. We're willing to restore balance, but not trust. Trust has to be rebuilt, and I'll be watching. I left the room, didn't wait for applause, didn't need it. Rick was still sitting, staring at the folder like it might light on fire and save him. HR summoned him 30 minutes later. No escort, no folder, no ceremony, just a short, quiet walk down a hallway that once felt like his kingdom. I passed the lobby on my way out. The same lobby they marched me through like a liability with legs. But this time, no one watched me go, because they were too busy cleaning up the mess I left behind. This one really hit. It's not just about revenge, it's about reclaiming control in a world that's so quick to erase quiet competence. I love that Lena didn't just get even, she got smarter, quieter, and decisive. Honestly, this is the kind of move you dream of when someone writes you off too soon. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.